Hello and welcome to our chat with Tara Montgomery. My name is Jamia Bigelow and I am head of partner marketing at Amazon's Fire TV and devices. And I'm a longstanding member and supporter of WIC, so I'm very excited to be here today with Tara. She is a veteran award-winning media executive producer, and head content creator for specials for OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, and oversees all on-air branded content for Oprah Winfrey, including primetime interviews, OWN spotlight specials, Super Soul, and live events. In 2019, Oprah's content partnership with Apple launched on Apple TV Plus, with Montgomery tapped as executive producer for the newly branded Oprah's Book Club, which includes author interviews, as well as creating and launching the NAACP Image award-winning series, The Oprah Conversation, featuring powerful conversations with high-profile guests, including President Barack Obama and actor Elliot Page. In 2020, Montgomery won 2 Emmys as she led production on the Netflix special, When They See Us Now, featuring Oprah's interview with the Exonerated Five and cast of the Emmy award-winning series, and for the Black Women Own the Conversation, a primetime talk show on OWN. Recently, Montgomery served as executive producer for the global television event Oprah with Harry and Meghan, watched by over 100 million people around the world through CBS. Congratulate her on her first Emmy nomination. Yay. And so in addition to on-air content, Montgomery oversees Oprah's presence in the podcast space as well. In 2017, she launched Oprah's first podcast, Super Soul, which has been downloaded over 380 million times worldwide. Super Soul has consistently ranked in the top 20 most downloaded podcasts each year since its launch. Additionally, Tara was executive producer for the special 8-part podcast series on the New York Times bestselling book Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents with Oprah, and author Isabel Wilkerson for Oprah's Book Club, which won a 2021 Webby Award. Wow, that is a lot, Tara Montgomery.
God, I'm so tired listening to that. I don't know how that happened. I would only say thanks to my team. So it makes it seem like I did all that. Those are just the projects that I worked on and led. But I all that work to my team.
Oh, well, that is amazing. And it is great to see you again. It's been a few years with a pandemic and lots of other things in between. But Tara and I actually met at a WIC event. We spent a week, thank you to WIC at Stanford Graduate School of Business with other women executives. And so it's great to come full circle with you and see you here today at another WIC event.
I know, it's so great to see you, Jamia, because I think about that. Tina Perry, who's the president of OWN, was at that executive summit as well, and we didn't know each other that well when we started. And that was really, I think about that week, and maybe you do too. I think about that week a lot, and it was so unique to be able to devote 5 days or 4 days to getting to know other women in cable, getting to know other, platforms, getting to know other business verticals, and then learn from like these most amazing educators at Stanford and be on that campus, and really just be able to devote our time and energy to that. And then of course the wine at night was another favorite part, which was like the cherry on top.
Right. Yes, it really was. It was such a great week. I feel very fortunate to have had that experience, and also harken back and friends with like some of the women that we met. And I remember Tina, she's a fellow Oklahoman, so we obviously bonded over that.
Oh, yeah.
And just, all that time that we had connecting, and then just like to be so have those conversations with with the professors. I remember sitting in that they would come to dinner with us, and we would get to just really kind of break down some of the days or talk about how it relates to something in the office. And it was just a great week overall.
And I just want to say one more thing about it, because we all became friends or linked on LinkedIn. And since we've been together, I've been able to watch everybody rise. Mm-hmm. Just people get promotions and get, new opportunities at different companies. And that's been another really cool thing to watch.
Right. Definitely. Well, great. Well, I guess let's go ahead and just jump in. Would love to just hear from you and have our audience just understand, how did you first get your start in media? What piqued your interest? How'd you get going on this career?
Sure. So TV was my hobby. TV and films was my hobby. My mom was probably crazy, and she let me have a TV in my room, which now everybody has a screen in front of them all the time. But back then it was unusual to have a TV in your room. And I watched it incessantly. And this was the dawn of like the news magazines. And I remember when CNN started, and I was really kind of into news. And then I thought really there was only one person that worked in TV, and it was the person, talking. And then I saw the film Broadcast News, which for a lot of women my age in this career, they remember seeing that film. I was in college at the time, and was blown away that there were 100 people behind the one person who was standing there in front of the camera. And so it was, one of those, I guess Oprah would call it an aha moment or something that like clicked. And I went, oh my God, I want to be her. And it was the character who, as a lot of people in news know, is Susan Zirinsky with CBS. And so switched my major, got a lot of internships at Nightline and ABC News, like sort of in the prime time of that network news magazine era. And long story short, I have just recently connected with Z, who she's known as, because I worked with her to produce the Harry and Meghan special that aired on CBS. And so I've connected with her only through email. But it's kind of funny that you're asking me about how my career got started, because I just met her virtually, this year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is so
and
great.
was able to tell her, which I'm sure hundreds of people have told her the same story. But she's like one of the most brilliant and most gracious women. So.
Oh, I love that. That is great. And and that's so awesome to hear about your internships too. I am a firm believer in internships, and they just like set you up. Like my first internship in college was with Walt Disney Company. I was like the remote campus marketing intern. And then a few years later, I ended up actually working there. And you just, it's just so crazy how those things happen. And I just am a real big proponent and advocate of internships.
I echo that, because I remember I was very fortunate to get really great internships and work with the best people in the business. And I remember asking them, what can I do to thank you? And they said, pass it on and do the same for somebody else. And I was like, that's such great advice. Yeah. So it's one of my favorite things too, because I was mentored so well. I try to do the same.
Exactly. That's great. And tell us a little bit about the culture at OWN. I'm sure we all kind of have a vision of what it's like, but just love to hear like what makes the culture at OWN so special, and how do you protect that, especially with like so much work happening at the same time?
Sure. So, I came from Harpo, which is Oprah's production company. I produced the Oprah Show for 16 years. So the Oprah Show, which was on for 25 years, had its own culture, right? So, and our culture was very much focused on the show. The show was the sun and the moon and the stars, and the beginning and the middle and the end. And it was like, we were all pulling in that direction. And the Oprah Show was like part of the culture, right? It was like part of American culture. And then a handful of us from the Oprah Show moved out to LA to work on OWN when it started exactly 10 years ago now. And we met and started, we came from, syndicated daytime talk to ad-supported cable, brand new, launching a network. Like it was quite a leap. It was, I think, a lot steeper climb than any of us had anticipated. So we met these phenomenal people who joined OWN, started OWN. Nicole Nichols is one, Tina Perry is another person who was a leader at the beginning, and who had all this experience in cable. And we, brought these two cultures together. And I think it's been, we've, it's only been 10 years. And we have worked really hard at making OWN its own culture and not Oprah. You know, Oprah is, of course, in the network, and she's like our visionary and, you know, our North Star. But OWN is its own brand now and its own culture. And we've fused, you know, Oprah, and then also super serving our viewer. That is actually what our culture is. That's the way I would view it. And Tina is constantly reminding us of that and having, you know, giving us that top of mind, as well as Oprah, that the culture is focused on super serving our viewer and giving our viewer, letting our viewer see herself in all different ways that she wants to see herself, in drama, in scripted drama, in unscripted, in reality, in talk, and in all the different facets of her life. And so I would say that is something that we protect very, very closely, and something that is probably spoken of every single day.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a ride, going from the world of single day syndicated television to look at where you are now, 10 years later. So many shows, so many specials, so many platforms. Like, it's just, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I remember when we first started OWN, I was like, how many hours do we need to fill? You know, I was like, whoa. So, yeah,
right. And that was before everything became, 10 years ago, we weren't in this, we were in a very linear world. And now, we're not there at all. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess I assume, like, tell us how that has changed, how you look at creating content today. Is it, what are the ups and downs of that?
Sure. So, so I straddle kind of two worlds. I oversee Oprah's content for the book club, like you said, that lives on Apple TV Plus, or actually that lives on Apple Books, and her interviews called The Oprah Conversation is on Apple TV Plus. And then I also oversee any of the primetime specials interviews that she does on OWN. So I'm constantly switching from ad-supported cable to a brand new streaming service that has its own identity and sort of content that they want to put out in the world. But the great part is the Oprah Show, to me, was the perfect college or prep for that, because every single day, as you may know from watching the show, it was different. One day it was makeovers, one day it was empowering women in some way, one day it was a huge Tom Cruise celebrity interview, and then another day it was like something that was going on in the national news. And so I think of it as like the greatest education I could have had for what Oprah's doing today in the world. So she can, she's open to doing any kind of content on all these different platforms.
Right. Wow. All still staying so true to that original, just the original Oprah and what she stands for and what she is all about and exudes and, fosters in people. Really, it's just great.
Yeah.
What a great thing to be a part of. How much do you think, we talked a little bit about like the shift from linear television to the world of streaming today. How much do you think technology is influencing how the industry is changing for content creators?
Yeah, I mean, that is like the $1 million, $1 billion question of the technology. I guess what I could point to just from the past year is when the pandemic hit. Normally when we shoot something with Oprah, there might be anywhere, back in the days of the show, there'd be 100 people in the studio. Now there's maybe about 20. And we went from that to Oprah alone in her house with a laptop, and using the technology to the best of our ability, trying to figure that out. And when she did her first interview during the shutdown, I could not see her. And I was on a phone. Talking to her, and she was on a screen talking to her guests. And I was so impressed with the technology with all the production crews and the production companies that we work with. That's how we started. And then by the end, you may be familiar with her interview that she did on Apple TV Plus with President Barack Obama. And we did that using green screen technology. And it looked like they were in the exact same room. And then once we did that, and it was seamless. And I still did all of that from my house.
Wow.
So I think I produced over 60 hours of content from my front, basically my front porch. And with my team all over the world and in all different places. But that was just one piece of the technology that I experienced that, and maybe you experienced this too, and maybe a lot of people who were watching were thinking, how are we ever going to do this? How are we going to do our jobs, especially, content creation? And we figured it out. It was very painful. It was very challenging. I remember sitting in my office thinking, I don't know how we're going to be able to do this. And it helps that Oprah's, one of the greatest communicators. And she's super open to all technology and innovations. And it was actually her idea to do Barack Obama via green screen. And all of that to say, she's now been opened up to, she can create any kind of content, and we've all been opened up to it. We can create any kind of content from anywhere we are. And that, I guess, maybe is a small, silver lining or a gift of what we've all been through.
Exactly. Yeah, I was watching the interview that she did with Andrew Day.
Yeah.
And it looked like the interview that she did with Harry and Meghan in her garden, but then she kicked off that conversation with, she was in Maui and Andrew was in LA, and it was just it was really remarkable. I was like so impressed with how you guys pulled that off technologically.
It's very, very challenging. I will say there are like 1,000 things that can go wrong. And I mean 1,000 things. And Oprah uses a teleprompter when she's reading intros and things like that. So I'm talking to the teleprompter operator through like this app, and the teleprompter operator's in LA, and Oprah is in Maui, and Andrew Day is in LA, and then Oprah's sitting in her garden by herself. And, it's with nobody around her. Like, and of course she's the best at what she does. I can say that. I think most people would agree. She's the best at what she does.
Yeah.
So to her, it's very natural, but still she had to get her eye line exactly right. And the way they do it, I don't even want to reveal how we do it because people, I don't, but people ask, I would say that is the number one question besides about Harry and Meghan, of course, the number one question I get is, how do you do the green screen? How do you do that?
Right. It's remarkable. So congratulations on your proprietary secret there.
Thanks.
And when you're, developing content, are there fundamental differences or thought process you go through to determine what will live on which platform and what performs best in what area, and how do you go about that?
Sure. So I think we can all probably relate to ad-supported cable versus streaming and how we consume it ourselves, and how our families are consuming it. And I'll just speak specifically to OWN. When we're thinking about what kind of content we want to do for OWN, again, it's our mantra. We want to super serve our viewer. And the really exciting part about that is like such an untapped space. Like the Black female viewer has been, I maybe would say, traditionally not served the way that OWN is serving our viewer now, and all different, all different age demographics from 25 to 55. And so we're constantly thinking, what is on her mind? What is she worried about? What are her goals? Who are the different women in that bracket? What's important to them? Is it faith? Is it fun? Is it drama? Is it self-improvement? Is it community? So those are the kinds of things that we're constantly thinking about. And then for the streaming services, those are predominantly interviews that Oprah is interested in doing, that she wants to talk to a certain person, whether it be, President Barack Obama and his, phenomenal first book that he published, or the actor Elliot Page, who, was the first trans man alone on the cover of Time magazine. And that interview is really sort of a perfect example of something that would be great for a streaming service, because it's not urgent, it's not pressing, but you can watch it in your own time, and you can rewatch it, and you can tell your friends, go to Apple TV Plus, and this is a great interview. Another thing that the streaming service allows us to do is, obviously, because of no commercial breaks, you can kind of have a free-flowing conversation, but then you can't tell us straight to what we're talking about next. So Oprah is, of course, such a phenomenal interviewer who chooses people like Elliot Page to talk to, who you want to tune into, on a streaming service for a full 30 or 40 or even 60 minutes. So I guess that I hope that helps explain like the two different platforms and how we create content.
And how about the types of content? Oprah is so culturally relevant, and we've had some major moments that especially impact your target audience of the Black female viewer. What are some of the decisions and moves that you've made in the past couple of years to really speak to what's going on there?
Sure. So, in the days immediately following George Floyd's murder and, the protests that went around the world, Oprah was very, she's very mindful of her platforms. I'll say that, very intentional and purposeful. That's where, people probably often hear her say everything starts with intention. And, there were protests going on around the world. We're ad-supported cable, so we're typically a scripted and unscripted, 3 nights out of the week. So we're not like, doing, really current content. Most of our content is produced weeks and months in advance. But during those days, I had many conversations with her, and what she kept saying after the protests were sort of sweeping around the world, she kept saying, where do we go from here? That is the question that she kept asking herself, and that she kept sort of, one of the brilliant things is, and I think she feels it in her solar plexus, is she takes in everything that is going on in the culture and around the world, and politics and media and everything, and she distills it down to a question usually. And the question in that period was, where do we go from here? That's what she wanted answered, because we were all experiencing this seismic shift, but then what? Right? It's like the question. So she and I started working on a list of people that she wanted to talk, and she wanted to ask that question, where do we go from here? And she wanted only Black leaders, because we were going to be talking to the own audience. And we booked about 10, really phenomenal Black leaders. And Oprah and I, was in conversation with David Zaslav, talking to him about this show, and he made the decision suggested and made the decision to roadblock that across all of the Discovery networks. And I'll just tell you, Jamia, that decision happened, I think, 2 days before we taped, or maybe a day before we taped. And Oprah was in her house again, alone. I'm in my house alone, and my team is in their houses, and we booked all of those people. And suddenly I found myself on Discovery Ops calls with 200 people from around the world, because it went to all the Discovery nets, while simultaneously trying to produce the show and write the script and figure out how we're taping this and how we're getting 10 people on a screen for Oprah to talk to. That ended up being 2 hours of specials. I think 18 million people watched it, which was so gratifying. And it really, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to the Black experience and how Black leaders wanted to discuss this. And also they all had very different opinions, of course, and very different paths on where do we go from here. And I've heard since then that a lot of people have used that special for, in HR training and in, discussions in schools and discussions in different companies. And, I never imagined that that would happen. I never imagined when Oprah just asked the question, where do we go from here? But then it would be on 18 different networks. And then, 18 million people would see it, and it would be used today sort of as this like a roadmap a little bit for a lot of people to understand where do we go from here. So that was I would say one of the most gratifying experiences from in those first sort of chaotic days of that time.
Right. How special for you to be able to be so close to helping make an impact there.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a really great way to put it. We're all kind of feeling like, how can we help during COVID, or how can we participate in, in social justice, or in, changing the narrative of the country or the culture, when we're all kind of trapped in our homes during that period of time. And that was really gratifying to hear people say, Oprah's favorite thing, I never thought of it that way before, or that really opened my eyes, or I see where I can make a difference now in my regular life. And I know that this all sounds very altruistic and, do-goodery, but it was a moment in our culture that we'll never forget. So I'm really glad we were able to contribute to the conversation.
Definitely. What are some other, socially relevant moments or issues that are important that you're tackling for OWN or on the other platforms?
I think one of the things that we did recently that Oprah felt really, really strongly about is celebrating Black fathers. As most people know, there are some really, really terrible negative stereotypes, and really the media is highly responsible for that. Television and films, either the news media, the way Black men and especially fathers have been portrayed in scripted television and in scripted films and those kinds of things. And Oprah had this idea that she wanted to, change that narrative in a way that she could. And she did that. I will also just add that she did that every day on the Oprah show, really. Every single day, we were changing the narrative in a little bit of way by the people that she invited to be on her platform. And so just recently, we celebrated Black fathers, and we did it with Sterling. She hosted it with Sterling K. Brown, and it aired on OWN. And we, Dwayne Wade, who, is a phenomenal father, really sort of changing the conversation about how to be the parent of an LGBTQ plus child. He was a guest on that show, and then we elevated and told stories of like 5 really phenomenal Black fathers. And that's just one little, I mean, that's not little, that's just one example of how Oprah is trying to start a new conversation. That's what she always wants to do. What she always wants to do, it's a very tall order, is what can we do at OWN better than anybody else can? And that's like kind of our, whether it's scripted or unscripted or the specials that I work on, her call to us is, why are people coming to our network when they could get that somewhere else? So that's kind of what we're always thinking of.
Right. That's super interesting, because it sounds like it provides kind of like a North Star for how you select what you take on and what you don't.
Yep. And I talk to our viewers a lot in my job. And before the pandemic, I traveled around the country and talked to our viewers. And there is always something like, and we have a phenomenal research department that does a lot of research with our viewers. And our viewers are just like, I come to OWN because I see myself, I see my family, but I also I see someone said it makes me want to be a better person, and I know that sounds so boring, like so, because sometimes you just want to have fun, and sometimes you just want to have drama and action and conflict and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's just something about the OWN viewer and OWN where people are just like, I know that Oprah is curating it, and so it's not going to be a waste of my time to engage in this content, and I'm gonna get something from it, whether it's fun, drama, joy, heartbreak, or any of those kinds of things. They know that they're going to get something.
Right. And how do you like find the balance between informing and just being there to entertain?
I would say that she's very cognizant of what's entertaining and versus informative, and in that ratio.
Right. Interesting. Can you give us a little sneak and behind the curtain? Like, what's that process like with her? How do you select and bring in the content to OWN, knowing that, ultimately, like, she's the one that's going to give it the stamp of approval?
Yeah. It's so there's two different people who one team leads scripted content, and then another team leads unscripted content. And so and then I lead specials and interviews that she does. So I'm trying to think of what I can say about the process. It's a lot of times we work together, and of course we work very closely with Tina, trying to figure out like what's going to rise to the top, that's going to get to Oprah's, where we can have a Zoom with her, and back in the day it would be a meeting, and how are you going to produce that sizzle? So the sizzle is actually what the show is, but also she is so good. She has a sense of whether something is appropriate or going to be great for OWN, like literally within a minute.
Wow.
I mean, she's just really, really, really good. And sometimes she'll surprise us, here's what I would say. I think people have an image of Oprah as somebody who maybe not be that open, but she is actually really open to anything and everything, and she always surprises us about what she says yes to, but then she's usually right.
right Not surprising. I mean, you don't get to where she is by being wrong a lot.
Exactly. It's so true. Good point.
Right. And does that process change, or how does the mindset change if you're working with her and deciding what goes on what platform?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because obviously we're focused on the Black female viewer for OWN, and then this past February I taped 5 or 6 different interviews with Oprah for 5 or 6 different platforms. And that was like completely overwhelming. And you're, just like all women, we can shift gears and keep this going over here and keep this going over here. And some were streaming, some were broadcast, and some were ad-supported cable. And so and Oprah can just shift from one to the next, like she's swimming in a warm pool. But she usually she and I decide together, say if it's an interview, I'll just use Elliot Page again as an example. When we reached out to Elliot Page, or started having a conversation with him, we just felt strongly that it felt right for Apple TV Plus. It just felt like the right audience, and it felt like no commercial interruptions. It felt more appropriate for streaming. For broadcast, and then of course Harry and Meghan was tailor-made for broadcast, Oh, yeah. And it was interesting to me how much was written about broadcast and why it was on broadcast, and how everyone was sort of gathering around and watching it live together. And that hasn't happened, in our world besides, sports, really. and the news. And so that those, I think Oprah's viewers, the consumers of her content, I feel like they can see that, what she does for OWN is tailor-made for OWN, and what she does for broadcast is tailor-made for broadcast, and what she does for streaming, it feels like we've kind of figured that out, so it's been really, really, really interesting.
Right. Yeah, that is so true about Harry and Meghan. And I think in 2021, it was me like texting with all of my friends, like the play-by-play as to what was going on, but live in real time. And you're right. Like, what else do you do that? I mean, we're big sports viewers in this household, so we watch a lot of live sports, but it was a different moment.
Yeah, it was a different moment. And I would say that there's very rare celebrity or newsmaker interviews where you don't know what's going to happen, or you don't know what they're going to say, or you haven't heard from them, so that's why it felt really right for broadcast. And also the other thing that was interesting about that experience was, we wanted everybody to be able to see it, and everybody to be able to see it for free. It felt relevant to everybody. And I'll just add too, obviously we've been going over a lot of like really sort of important social conversations that Oprah has had over the past year, but that one in particular about mental health and about race felt really important for everybody to have access to it.
True. Yeah. And how about podcasts, just being that it's a completely different medium? How do you work through what's right for podcast and what's resonating for you in that space?
Yeah, so I oversee 2 podcasts for Oprah, and then also we're starting a new podcast space under OWN, because Super Soul, the podcast, is through the OWN network, and it is just an enormous following in podcasts, and so it's opening up a lane for us to again super serve our viewer by producing some podcasts. But I'll talk about 2 podcasts. I'm not sure if everyone will be familiar with the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I hope it wins every single award. It was a New York Times bestseller. And the book is so intense, and a very, very immersive experience that Oprah and I were talking about. How do we really translate that to consumers? And the best way to do that would be through a podcast. Because, you're in your car. Podcasts are very personal, as you probably know. You're in your car, or you're in headphones, or you're alone listening somewhere, or you're in a waiting room. And that particular book lent itself for a very immersive, very dense podcast conversation. And it was an 8-part conversation. And, the book is like 600 pages or something like that. Highly recommend the book, by the way, for anybody interested. And it did really well, and it won a Webby, which we were really happy about. And the Super Soul podcast is another kind of interesting case where Oprah did a show called Super Soul Sunday. It was the most personal show to her when OWN launched, and she felt really, really strongly about it. And it had a very good following on Sunday mornings, and it had it's sort of this core group of viewers that followed it. And when podcasts really started taking off, which I know they've been around for a long time, but they've really started taking off in the last couple of years, we thought, the nature of Super Soul and those conversations really seemed to be intimate and tailor-made for a podcast. Well, Jamia, we launched this podcast, and it has now close to 400 million downloads. We just can't even believe it. But it was the TV show, which is really not. But the TV show was ultimately a conversation, which is what podcasts are, of course, many of them. And each episode gets about 1 million downloads, and we've been doing it for 3 years. And I never imagined in a million years that an ad-supported cable show could become a podcast that would be, like the in the top 20 every single year.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been a huge education.
Definitely. Is there a particular platform that is the most difficult to develop content for, or that you have to like really kind of put yourself in a different mindset?
Yeah, I would say streaming is really difficult because, there's not a lot of interview shows on streaming, right? I
Right.
mean, you can kind of name them. There, some of them have gone by the wayside. And part of there's David Letterman has that show. I guess Comedians in Cars you could call an interview show as well. David Letterman show is that my next guest needs no interruption. But they're just not a lot. People don't go to streaming for interviews typically.
Mhm.
But she's had we've had real success in doing, you may remember the HBO special Finding Neverland. Was about
Yeah.
Michael Jackson and two of his alleged victims. Oprah felt really strongly about that documentary, and we went out to New York and taped a show after the show. We called it After Neverland, and it aired on HBO, and it was sort of like a companion piece to you watch the documentary, and then Oprah did the interview of the two men and the director. We did the same thing for Netflix for When They See Us, the huge Ava DuVernay series that she did on the Exonerated Five. And Oprah interviewed the real Exonerated Five and the cast members, and then it was a companion piece to that Netflix series. Those ended up. I mean, I know HBO wasn't streaming back then, but those ended up being really, really successful for both of those platforms. And then trying to get people to watch an interview show on Apple TV Plus, I will say, is a huge, huge challenge. And so, we've interviewed really fascinating people, and trying to keep people engaged, like I said, where you don't have a commercial break and you can't tease to what's coming up. So I'll use Harry and Meghan as an example. You were like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. And then you see the tease for the commercial break and you're like, oh my God, what? There's more, oh my God, another bomb's going to drop. You can't do that. And you can't do that in streaming. So, and you don't have like an open and you don't have a commercial break. So that's just been, an interesting challenge.
Right. Yeah. The marketing there is different in terms of like building, because it's like a cold start, but you have to let people know that it's there and, bring them in through other mediums to get to that space, to carve out the time to make that decision.
Yep. Yep. And most people consume streaming just like you and I do. It's because your friend told you about it usually a lot of times, or you read about it and they said, don't miss it, which is totally different than seeing, Oprah just interviewed Jennifer Hudson for OWN. And it did really great for our audience, and our audience really loved it. But you could do, there was a lot of promos and, the commercial breaks and all those kinds of things. So
Right. And what do you think we've talked about all the evolution of the platforms and, working through all of the different things that are happening in the world. What's next for OWN and Oprah and what you guys are working on?
Sure. So I think what's next for OWN is I hear Tina talk about this a lot, and I think it's, we're all very excited to get behind it. It's been a really rough year, right? It's been a really rough year, and especially for the Black community. And I think one of our goals is to bring joy and levity to our viewer. And, we can see that kind of content is resonating. And, excitement and, just, juicy stuff rather than like the heavy, things that we've been focusing on for the past year for obvious reasons. We were being part of that conversation and leaning into that conversation. And then of course, Oprah and Tina would say, we've always been part of that conversation. We just want to elevate it and move it forward. So I would say for OWN, look forward to that. And there's a lot of dramas coming up for OWN, and there's going to be more unscripted, and hopefully some specials that Oprah will host. and again, I know I repeat it all the time, but super serving that Black female viewer who has a special place at OWN is our goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. And how do you, like, were there things that you were able to do with your team during these times where everything was so heavy to remind, then just bring in that joy and levity? Or there's some things that you did as a team culture?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I did, it was, which I actually got inspired from a friend who did it for me. Things were, especially because a lot of my team was living in LA where protests were really intense, and their friends and family were involved, and then they also had to work like these crazy long hours. So maybe this is a little small thing, but I sent everybody a case of ice cream, and and I was just like, I don't know what that was. I'm sure you felt the same way. You were kind of like trapped, all the things that you typically do to keep, taking your team out to lunch or trying to give them time off or give them a vacation. We couldn't do that. And so a friend sent me some ice cream, and my family went bananas. And I went, like, they were like, this is the best present ever. And I went, oh my God. So I sent my whole, on behalf of OWN, I sent, and Tina, we sent our whole team ice cream, and they were all very happy about that. So it's just a nice gift to give. And the other things we did was, Oprah was very generous to our team because she knew that we were working so hard. And so she did a lot of congratulatory Zooms with them. Mm-hmm. And, as you know, everybody's kind of like in their box and working. And then she sent us champagne a couple times, mm-hmm. and we did a champagne toast. And so that was really nice.
That is nice. I love the ice cream because in times like that, it's just nice to kind of take a moment with like the simple things in life. And that's just like, it sort of like brings it all down a level,
Yes, it brings it all down a level. And it also kind of reminds you of being a kid.
Yeah. And human.
Yes. And human. And then also you could share it. So whoever was in your household got to enjoy it too, and that was also too. Oh, it was funny. After one of our shows, Oprah sent us Chicago pizza too. So, we try to do those little things to keep everybody, sort of social, and feeling like, it's just a really challenging on how to thank everybody. But mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely. And then how do you inspire your team? You have so much going on. How do you keep everybody on their toes, but it's at the same time inspire them to think differently and, keep super serving that key audience of yours?
Yeah. That is a very tall order. And I will say, Oprah is our inspiration. And like you said, our North Star. I think that everyone on just my team in particular, and certainly everybody at OWN, feels a great sense of pride in working for her and everything that she stands for, and, sort of quality and excellence, and the bar is really high. You kind of, when you work for her and her brands, you kind of get to take the lid off of your whatever you thought you could do. You're like, oh, I could actually go up here, mm-hmm. Like, even just where do we go from here as an example, we get to devote an hour of programming to this like hugely important conversation. Who gets to do that? Like that who gets to do that? And mindful and thoughtful and thought-provoking. And so I would say, I don't want to speak for my team, but that's what keeps them inspired, is mm-hmm. that almost anything that you can dream up, and if she thinks that's a great idea, if Tina thinks it's a great idea, everyone at OWN gets behind it, and is all like pushing and raising in that direction.
Right. Yeah, that's so great. The idea of being so connected to something that's meaningful, and also continually raising the bar, makes it probably feel like every day is a new day. And yes. There's just, yes, you've been with Oprah for a long time, but it's so different. And it's like every day, every year, every month, it's just a new challenge. You're rising to the occasion and a new opportunity for you and your team, which is probably just keeps it fresh and new.
Yeah, and Jamie, that is such a wonderful way to describe it because, I had a lot of colleagues in the talk show world, right? And a lot of those colleagues are still in the talk show world, or they moved on to a different world. And me and my team, some of our team came from the show originally. Half of my team did, and half are new from OWN, and they are like a huge, awesome, huge added benefit to us. Was that, I started as a news producer and was a talk show producer for so long, and then to now be producing on all these different platforms, and to be, meeting all the people at WICT and being inspired by them, I kind of can't believe it. Like I really kind of can't believe it.
Yeah, like pinch yourself. It's great.
But we all know people who, they got to be this one thing, or you meet people in television, you go, okay, you started on this track, or you started in the scripted space and now you're in the scripted space, or you started in unscripted, you're going to stay in unscripted.
Right.
And the beauty of Oprah and her brands, and especially OWN, and I would also say Tina, is they're like, what can we dream up and what can we do differently and how can we do it? So it's just been an unbelievable, joyful ride.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also one of the benefits of being in this industry, right? Like it has evolved and changed and afforded the opportunity for our careers to do the same. Like I was in the, in the content space and, in marketing for so long. And it's like, well, now I got to jump over to the streaming world and work with all those people that I was I understand like their lens because I was in that space, but now I'm on the other side. And it's just, I like feel so grateful to be in an industry like this that affords people that opportunity to be able to create and reinvent and do really super interesting things with their career.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. Totally.
Yeah. Well, Tara, it was so great. It was amazing to reconnect with you, hear your story and all the work that you've done and all the meaningful and impactful shows and content that you guys are behind. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, for humoring me, trying to be my best, Oprah. Not so much.
Yeah, you did a really, really good job. You did.
Hosting here. So thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers. And, look forward to staying in touch with everybody through WICT and staying connected with you too as well, Tara, because this was really great.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.